All right, here we are. Pissed off and ready to go. Seriously, I'm having a moment here, dude. I'm ready to. Something that I don't talk about with this work is the absolute potential to feel completely undervalued. There are times when you work with people and you like give it your fucking all, and no matter what, it's just not appreciated.
Yeah, I have a feeling that part of that probably is just the nature of the work. Like if, if I was to think of anyone who works in the ministry realm, uh, when you help that many people and you're dealing with that many egos, uh, you're gonna have those days where you come from helping or assisting someone and it's roses and daisies, and then other times where it's just there's an unfillable pit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like, okay, occasionally it's not frequent, but there's certainly the propensity for people to have a difficult experience and blame it on the person, the facilitator, even if you just sit there quietly or if you cater to every need. And I don't know, man. It's just an aspect of this work that I think is not really talked about. That's it's relevant. I mean, if you're out there sitting for lots and lots of people, or even just a handful of people, man, like you're putting a lot of energy. If you're a conscientious, like attentive sitter or facilitator, you're not just like there reading a book. You're there really focusing on the individual and on the kind of situation. And I mean, I spend most of my time. I feel like it's okay to say this. It's a little weird to say, but I do spend most of my time kind of in prayer. When I'm doing that work, and you can call it meditation or whatever you want, but just really focused attention, and then to spend 6 or 8 hours of that devoted attention to someone, and to just kind of be like dismissed is I guess it's good though, because it keeps my ego in check, and doesn't allow me to get too boasty. And then there's certainly people who do have a deep appreciation. And I did a sit recently where someone said to me that it was the perfect perfect person. They couldn't have had a better person sit with them. So I just need to focus on that. But for some reason today, that kind of I don't know. I guess it feels like rejection. You know, is sitting with me a little bit, but it's all good.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I really wanted to kind of like say within that is when you're talking about entheogens, you're talking about, yeah, you're diving into yourself. I mean, a huge chunk of that process is that inner work. And for some people who are already seeking out something like sacred mushrooms, it's, sometimes there's a little bit of turmoil in there. And then what you get out of that, like maybe you don't like the answers that you found within yourself.
Oh yeah, no,
So,
that's very frequently what it is. Somebody comes up against something that they don't want to see, and so it's a kind of a projection or deflection onto whoever's there. And because whoever's there, if they're doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, they're going to continue to provide that reflection for you. You know, if someone tells me like they're trying to work on some issue, and we go into the space, and afterwards, you know, it's coming up in conversation, and I'm asking them difficult questions. You know, it might not always be kind of the easiest thing, but it's just like that's what you brought me on for. You didn't bring me here just to like give you water and a blanket. You know, we're working through difficult material, and um, you know, always do that in a compassionate way. But man, I tell you, that resistance can be serious stuff. So did you listen to that podcast that we put out today?
Oh, I am about halfway through it, and a much needed podcast. Even the little video that you shared, some other social media person
Mhm.
who's also referencing the psychology of this. It's not even it's a global uh, porn industry. Uh, I mean, it's something that you and I had talked about, a little bit in conversations, and it's kind of an epidemic in ways.
I'd say if 98% of men have watched porn within the last, yeah, I'd say that's a something of an epidemic. Yeah.
Oh, and I really appreciated the way that Courtney went about like talking that, even within this framework of porn, that there was what was the word? It wasn't responsible, but
Ethical.
ethical. Yeah, that was really interesting too because for some parents never have that conversation with their children, the old birds and the bees and the intimacy of relationships. And so if your first experience of like this is what the birds and the bees are is just scrolling through Pornhub and just seeing all these like hashtag categories, like I don't know. I think it was a much needed yet probably a rocky, uh, you know, there's resistance out there.
Yeah, I think that's what a little bit got me feeling that way too, is that I can I don't know, nobody has directly said anything, but I can imagine that there are a number of people that are like uh not appreciating that conversation so much. You know? But anyway, I don't know, man. It's yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, it's I did ever tell about the guy that years ago that I worked with who was working on he came to mushrooms in part to get over a porn addiction, and
No.
yeah, and he said after the trip he came, he was like, yeah, so I came here trying to work through this porn addiction, and so I got into the mushrooms and they came on, and I was like asking them to like help me with this porn. And the mushrooms were like, oh, so you want to watch porn? Okay, here's some porn. And he said that it was 4 hours of every kind of insect having every kind of sex. And he said it wouldn't stop. It was the most horrible, like all these fucking bugs like doing all these crazy sex acts. And he said after that he never, I mean, it's been years since I've talked with him, but for for a good year, I know after that experience, he didn't he didn't watch any porn.
Baba Booey.
Is he on?
Yeah, because
Nice.
that sounds about right. And
Oh,
that's so true. The entire time I was saying, like you were talking about it, it's like the the clown jester role that the mushrooms will throw
oh,
back into that mirror.
so much. Yeah, so much. The twisted reflections we get.
You want
But
to see fucking? Here you go.
yeah, you want to watch some porn, buddy? I'll show you some porn. But I mean, I recently had someone else ask me about sexual arousal during mushroom states, and I think that's something that is really worthwhile talking about as well, because it's it's not uncommon. I mean, I've had numbers of people that I've worked with who have had like the cosmic orgasm, and I've certainly had like prolonged orgasmic experiences with the mushrooms, and you know, that's part of the um, you know, part of my understanding of the experience again comes back to this uptake of chi energy, vital energy, which is sex energy, you know, and the shamanic cultures, Mesoamerica and around the world, really. Um, I've read multiple accounts of that sex energy being, and until we talked about this a little bit at the end of the podcast, but that being the the energy that's used to heal people in these ceremonies. And so, you know, it's just like it's something that we don't talk about, but it is such a basic, fundamental part of our lives. It's crazy.
Oh, for sure. Um, and that's kind of interesting, though. So, of all the, the thousands of people that you know, worked with, I mean, I guess it would make sense that there's only a sliver that would even talk about, like, saying, like, oh, I had an arousal within the mushroom space. Um, I don't think everyone who even necessarily had that's gonna like raise their hand and
Yeah,
just say
right.
that at the circle.
I had this. I worked with this guy one time. He was in his late 70s or so, and he came with his wife, and they were actually in an article, and he talked about it in this article, in the Sunday Times article. But he had a his trip was just vaginas. The whole trip, his first trip anyway, was just like all these different vaginas, and he just talked about. And it was one of the funniest integrations. Like all these people are talking about like all the crazy things that they experienced and like reliving past lives and all this stuff. And he's like, I just saw vaginas all afternoon long everywhere.
That's pretty good.
Alrighty.
What was being mirrored from your inner
Man,
self? Um, I don't know if he would have been, similar to what you were talking about, the porn addiction guy. Who
no.
knows if that man didn't touch a vagina for at least a year.
Yeah, no. He was married.
Okay.
But and both of them were married, and it's just, you know, it's just interesting. And I mean, the guy who had the vaginal trip, it was not really sexualized at all. It was just like that was just the element of the whole trip. And excuse me, yeah, it was whatever. This shit, you know, it gives you what you need.
That's true. That's very true. Um, you know, something I brought up to you that I thought maybe, worth doing is I talked to you a little bit a couple maybe a month or so ago about a Mount Tripmore. You're
Mount Tripmore.
yeah, you're four if you were to have four people in history, like Mount Rushmore has four faces,
Oh, mhm.
who would you take?
Yeah, I used to do this with psilocybin or psilocybin chronicles. Ask people, not their Mount Tripmore, but ask them who, if there was anybody in time and history that they would trip with, who would it be? Yeah, it's a great to expand that out into a group experience. I don't know, man. Frederick Douglass was always one of my ones that I wanted to trip with, just because I've always admired his will and intellect. Um, excuse me. Who else, man? Throughout time, do you hear the chaos outside my door?
Sounds perfect.
Yeah, I am. I am experiencing a level of annoyance and frustration today that is beyond words at the moment. Who else? Who else? Who else? Man, do you know the comedian Bill Hicks? You ever watched any of his stuff?
Only the stuff I think you sent me some stuff and then like YouTubed a little bit of his work.
I'd probably trip with him because he was one of the first real psychedelic comedians I like tripping with comedians. I've tripped with a couple of comedians, and I've had some good times there. Um, who else? I'm kind of curious about old Elon, man. I ain't gonna lie. The guy, he's current. But obviously, but he just seems to really have an incredible mind, and I tend to think that he's really like
A
wanting to make.
robot?
No, I think he's wanting to
Oh,
make the world a better place.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. And let's see, who is another person? Not Terrence McKenna. No. Um, maybe Tim Leary because he just really seemed to have fun. Um, that's like I was talking this the other day with someone I was sitting with. How they had a really enjoyable trip, and a lot of times people feel guilty about that or like they shouldn't be enjoying their trip. And she did, and I just kind of relayed that after it's all said and done, that's one of the things the mushrooms have shown me is after it's all said and done, life is really about having fun, you know, and you get through all the trauma and all the pain and all the stuff, and you learn to laugh at it. And I kind of like try to take a shortcut there now, and just instead of like dragging myself through the pain and the misery, just try to get to the laughter. Um, but also allow for whatever someone else needs to have if they really need to go through that painful exploration of personal content. It's all good. But if we're trying to rewire our brains, then it seems pretty helpful to kind of rewire them for positivity, for playfulness, and joy. Baba Booey's asking why I would not trip with Terrence McKenna. Well, I wonder how many people know that will listen to this know this, but Terrence McKenna stopped taking mushrooms long before he stopped promoting mushrooms because he had a trip that was, according to uh, Dennis and Kat Harrison, he had a trip that was so nihilistic, so much the void, um, that it scared him, and he came out very rattled, saying nothing has any meaning, and he never ate mushrooms again after that, is what I've read from Dennis. And um, that was disappointing to hear. After I listened to Terrence for a long time and was a huge fan, and I'm not saying I'm not still a fan of his words, and I think he has a lot of valuable reflections and insights and ideas. Um, but I like to trip with people that can take it to the fucking face and just dig in and come out and love it. Um, I think that the fact that there is no meaning to it all is actually very liberating. It means then that we get to apply our meaning, and that circles back to the meaning of life being to enjoy it. So even myself, I want to get off of this kind of feeling sorry for myself that, you know, working for somebody or helping someone that didn't seem to really value my time and expertise, and just kind of laugh it off and move on. This life is, and I have been in such an incredibly positive state for the last probably like 4 weeks going on. It's been the longest I've had just like a really positive outlook for a very long time, maybe since I was a kid, honestly. And so I'm going to keep that focus. Keep that focus. Got anybody out there that wants to be part of this conversation? We'd love to talk with you about your psilocybin experiences. I know we got some people watching. Uh, we could, let's see, where's that link at? There it is. Thank you, Tristan. How do I? What the fuck? Oh, wait. Did they
So
do
I
that?
didn't know that about Terrence McKenna, but what the nihilistic, outcome of that, I could very well see that versus like an LSD or a DMT, just based upon my understanding of the mushrooms and somewhat of their nature of things. Because I mean, the biggest thing within all this internal struggle that we create that they end up showing you is that it while it has existed, it doesn't in a way like matter, like all these like tethers that and chains and things around your feet from it. Um,
Mm.
and I don't know. I bet that wasn't like a 3 or 5 gram dose that he took to get him to that place, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
Whenever.
I don't know. But I guess the main thing is like if you're going to be promoting something, like if I was not taking mushrooms, then I don't know. I mean, that's not entirely true. I can't say that like it's not to say that I don't have the right to
Hmm.
promote mushrooms if I'm not taking them. I suppose it comes down to the meaning, right, of why I wasn't taking mushrooms. I guess I haven't taken any mushrooms since December. I mean, aside from a couple of grams, I mean, like, I haven't taken a big dose of mushrooms since December. Um, but for him to like be afraid of it and then still be promoting it, I guess that's where it starts. It really gets uncomfortable for me, like don't promote the thing if you're not going to engage with it out of fear. Um, if you're not engaging with it because of, I don't know, other reasons, then whatever. But like, there's like so many people that are promoting psilocybin right now that have little to no experience with it. It's not very different, really. It's like if you don't have some skin in the game, then are you really the one that should be out there telling other people to do it? Um, Especially just, I don't know, just knowing how different the experience can be. And it's like so fucking crazy how we just have this idea as a society, like in the therapeutic world, even that so many people think that the mushroom trips are just like you go in, you talk to God, you come out, and everything's okay. Or you go in and you see the pretty colors, and there you go. Now you're fixed. Yeah. So anyway,
No, gosh, whenever I first stepped into the space, like not really having like an integration support at that specific point. I mean, realizing, when you do kind of unplug from these Western illusions in many ways, it is overwhelming. I mean, in some capacities when you come out of it, and then I don't know. I believe that.
hell yeah. Like you mean the mushroom experience itself is overwhelming, or like coming back into life, or what?
Well, yeah, I just almost like the next day, like yeah, I think that you gain a lot of internal insights, but realizing how many like facades that you have built up that you thought were real, and like these are hardcore identities that I believe in.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
Oh,
it's
oh,
hard to have those walls just completely demolished the next day and then walk around and just enter back into your role.
yeah. That is 100%. When you realize that it's all a shell game and everybody's just kind of got a playing a role. Um, it can be disturbing for a while, but then at the same time, I think it eventually can become liberating again because you realize that you're just playing a character. Like it's just a game. It's just a fucking game, y'all. Like that is, and that goes into even deeper considerations for me anyway on um like who started the game, who's running the program, right? Like what's going on in the background, and like how is it that everything just seems to be provided for us? uh Aliens, man, we can definitely start talking about aliens more now, just because of all this shit. Tristan knows I'm about it. Uh, that's my Courtney makes fun of me. My TikTok feed is all about disclosure. It's relevant, y'all. I mean, there is more than one ancient text, including the oldest ancient text, that says that they came down here and created us, basically through genetic manipulation, created a the human species. And that makes a hell of a lot more sense to me than the stoned ape theory. I do not believe we fast forwarded a half a million years in the fossil record because we ate some psilocybin. I think it's very possible that psilocybin has a significant role to play, and perhaps mushrooms are one of those engineered organisms that we're working with here. But there's much more going on than that. And is it possible that we are being, to some extent, assisted? I mean, you know, in terms of technological advancements, I think that is very, very likely. But even at a much deeper level, um, gosh, where does all this stuff come from? Like,
I think it's truly, from my small amount of understanding, in the way that there's a form of faith inside of this entire thing as well, because all the insights that you gain, it's like a cat and mouse thing, because then it just slip like you can approach what you're grasping, but you can't ever quite grasp it. And I think that's almost a beautiful part of it as well, because I find that intriguing. In a way, it's like I subconsciously just think that it's the guessing game of all guessing games, and you're never supposed to figure it out.
no, I agree. I think it's an ongoing game that we get deeper and deeper revelations in. But if we ever figure it out, then the game is over. And even if we do advance on to greater levels, which I think that's entirely likely, it's still another level of the game, right? Like if I advance on to become some solar object, if my 10 incarnations or 100 incarnations from now, I am the sun. Like, how much more knowledgeable, how much more aware am I going to be of like everything than I am now? There's always going to be something that we don't know. There's always that, behind the something there is the nothing, and the something can never know nothing because it's always something, you know. Uh, but what I don't know how to dig into it much deeper, but it is something that I have been experiencing for a while, and really trying to observe more and engage with more. Is this, I'm going to puke in my mouth when I say it, but the manifestation, people talk about manifestation. And for so long, I just was like, man, shut up with that bullshit. And I can't say that anymore because I know that in my life there's been way too many times that something has, like, I have, well, just like the irises, like, I know obviously manifestation does not mean you create something out of thin air, but in this game that's playing, it does very much seem like there are kind of pieces that come in to my field or our individual fields relative to, it could be just our attention, but I don't feel like it's that. I feel like it is um relative to our desire, right? um it's no coincidence to me that day we went out looking for ovoids, and I went out feeling so good. And this lady just comes up out of nowhere and is, like, gives me my favorite, asks me if I want to go dig my favorite flowers out of her yard. Uh, and then what, 3 or 4 days ago, very similar thing. Like, just feeling like how much I really appreciated those flowers and how much I loved that experience and how that felt to me very much like a gift and a communication from the greater intelligence. And then to drive down the road on a whim and there's just this massive pile of irises that someone's giving away, and I get every one of them. And my grandma, I've been thinking about this too, in terms of the how things come into play. Uh, my The reason I love irises so much is because my grandma had them, and when she passed away, I went and dug up some of her irises, and that's the ones that were in my original yard. And I've had 3 different homes where I've lived and planted those irises and made big um, patches of them or whatever. And here lately, since I've been having these kind of experiences of just what seemed to be deceased people communicating, I was laying in my bed. I think it was last night or the night before, and I was meditating last night, and I was like, is that my grandma? Did she do that? You know? And then there's the whole like this law of attraction thing, which is another one of those kind of pukey new age topics. But in mushroom space, it's been very, very clear to me that this is a reality, that what you think about, where you put your energy into, we are magnetic beings and we are magnetizing all of that stuff to us. Um, so, that's that's the interesting play here in terms of the game and uh, this thing that we're in, this interactive hologram, I like to call it. And, you know, who's the creator? Who's the created? Is there actually any difference between the two? And if not, then what possibilities does that open up for us? You know, we spend, think about people that come to psilocybin for mental health improvement, and it's like it's so much about focus. And so, like, if you go into a mushroom trip and you're trying to work on why you're sad and you're trying to like get through, that's what I was getting to earlier. Like, the end game is happiness. So why not just like leave all that other stuff behind and make a straight line for it? If you go into the mushroom experience and you're trying to work through all your issues and trying to blah 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 blah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that it is a shorter route or a longer route to the destination of happiness. And everybody's like, that's what they say. They want to be happy, right? So if we want to be happy, then it might be more productive if we focus on the happiness rather than the troubles that we think get in the way of our happiness. And I think that's a big part of what's helped me be in such a better mood in the last month, is really putting a lot of attention and focus on the things that are going really well for me and the people in my life that are really beautiful to me. And it seems to just continue expanding that out, which is kind of one of the reasons why I got questioning on this, excuse me, you know, the people who may not appreciate the work that I do for them in the mushroom space. The question ultimately arose, is that coming into my experience because there's still a part of myself that is not appreciating me? You know, it's like that James Allen that we're reading. I think this last week it was talking about as we refine our inner world, we see that reflected in our outer world. I'll tell you what, the other night when everybody's over at our house hanging out, there was a minute that we were sitting at the table, and I was just like looking at not even me. It's not like I was looking at me. I was looking at the same creature, the same thing. Like everybody that was there was no difference. And it was there was at a point where it was like it was me. And that was a very interesting experience. So we got Emil on here. Oh, sorry. Emil. What's going on, B man?
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Busy
Can you
like
hear
a
me
bee.
well?
Your audio's a little muted.
All right, let me get up.
Nope. In and out. In and out.
He'll be back.
Oh, he'll be back. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, so anyway, it's interesting to note the things that come into our lives, and when we can find a correlation to how we feel and what we're kind of spending our putting our attention on, it becomes curious. I had this one trip where years ago out in the country by myself, and like I was, curled up for a long time, and I finally got the courage to look up, and I looked up at the sky, and I was like, I understood that was mind, and everything that was happening there was happening here, and it was so powerful, and it was one of those things that, like you were saying, the next day you walk away from and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, mind mind is not in here. Mind is everywhere. And I still hold that to be true. I've experienced that on deeper and deeper levels. Um, so while I do get a little grossed out by the new agey law of attraction stuff, it does appear to be quite real that we.
Oh, you can't allow all these texts from 800, 1,000 years ago. You can't allow them just to exist as is. You got to apply modern language onto it and kind of give it a twist. It's like, there's nuggets within this new age stuff, as like
Mhm.
contorted as it is, and sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like me, just like if I'm throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? Like the new agey people who are ungrounded and don't have a um like a real working practice which in which they engage with, doesn't mean that the concepts that they're espousing aren't true. I mean, this you did you see that? I think I shared it in the Sanctuary channel on Discord. The CIA releasing that um, classified studies that they had done around manifesting through mental energy.
Is that recently, like this week?
And no, it would have been like three
Okay.
weeks ago or so. But I can dig it back up if you want. But that's something that, yeah, that was done by the CIA years ago, working with um, not just like this kind of manifestation stuff, law of attraction stuff, but working with um, what's it called? Uh, long distance viewing, and like I listened to an interview a few days ago of it was actually this was the fuck I got it on my YouTube list. Um, he was the head of the CIA's kind of paranormal study division, right? And he was being interviewed by Brett Weinstein. It was a really great interview. I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick. Um, but he was saying that they were legitimately looking through documents in sealed uh, safes and shit, and that like he was saying that like it's no joke. I'm not gonna try to find my YouTube's logged out, so I'm not gonna fuck with it. But so it's something that Cordy and I've been talking about in terms of what we could do with our community gatherings at Sanctuary and just meditated focus on a peaceful world or what it is that we want to see, and how this was an interesting thought that we came to yesterday. If you've ever listened to Dolores Cannon, if you guys ever out there listen to this lady Dolores Cannon, she was also a um, UFO investigator for the CIA, believe, or some high level government uh, faction. She was a hypnotherapist who started coming across all this crazy, weird past life shit, and um, then she like started talking to aliens through the people, and a lot of what she talks about sounds very mushroom trippy. And so she was talking about how there's this concept of the new Earth that's going to come, and how everything's changing. We're going into a new dimension or whatever, and all this, and speaking in terms of timelines, like this is where I think it's really interesting to think about. We've got all this evidence of multi dimensions, the multiverse, whatever, and if the theories that some quantum physicists have around every time there's a decision made, that there is created an alternate universe where the other decision was chosen, and so we got to talking about that in terms of like if we put our focus on the world that we want rather than the world that we see, right? We see the world with war and on disease and all the things that we see, but if we were to continually put our focus on the world that we want, then maybe we would just, as time progresses, we would find ourselves moving slowly into that positive timeline, and that all these timelines are like diverging all the time, and that we can continue by continuing to make a choice, just like me finding this level of happiness that I've found. Every time I choose to look at the happy, every time I choose to like let the bullshit go and focus on the thing that brings me happiness, it's like I'm choosing to go down that decision tree into that universe.
Mm-hmm.
And while maybe argue that I'm not changing whatever is happening out there outside of me, it could also be argued that I am. And that slowly over time, if we all continue to focus in that positive direction, that we will find ourselves in that same timeline together where we're experiencing like a peaceful world, a world where there's plenty of food and plenty of resources. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I really like for the idea that in the the infinite realm of possibilities, that there's a dimension where all the other decisions that you didn't make are still simultaneously playing out. Kind of made me think. I think it was last week, um, last Monday, whenever we were leaving your house, we were driving out onto Broadway, and there was like a pretty bad wreck, and I kind of had this thing that hit me, and it was like, I also wonder like that stuff. Like if that's also possible for your other dimensions. Like, do you think there's dimensions where it's like you have like past?
Oh, where I like died in another dimension?
Yeah.
Why not? Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. I gotta ask, like, yeah. I don't give a shit how weird it sounds at this point. I'm just gonna go with it. Uh, like this notion of protecting spirits or guardian angels. Some people talk about, like I have had multiple times in my life where I should have fucking died. Period. Where it was so close. I mean, and the one that strikes me the most is that like my life was saved by someone who like it was a I don't know how the fuck he did it. I don't know how the fuck he did it. And we were young. I was fucking around on some weights, and I pulled this like weight system with the flat bars and whatever. Pulled it up, and I fell and slid underneath of it, and my head was right underneath where the weights were coming down. It was probably like I don't know 150 pounds of weights that was going to be coming down and crushing my head. And there was a guy that was sitting beside me or standing beside me who like the timing on it and the fact that he was looking straight ahead and he just swung and grabbed those weights like with some super fucking strength when we were kids and grabbed it right as he got so close to my nose. The craziest thing though, this man, I still think about this. Uh I had taken some mushrooms. I took some mushrooms back years ago. I was living in this little apartment complex with my ex-wife. I was like 21 years old, and there was a bar there close by that I used to go drink at. And this was back when I was like mixing mushrooms and alcohol. And so I ate some mushrooms, hung out around the house that day. She was gone working, hung around the house by myself. Excuse me. And then decided to go over to that little bar. And I got over to that bar and I'm tripping, you know, and but it's nice. It's feel good. It's cold outside. Remember I had this big fuzzy jacket on. And there was this drunk as fuck old Irish guy there. And like, he started talking to me some like crazy talk, but it was like he was it was like he knew I was tripping. He was talking, and I've had multiple experiences with alcohol where there's some kind of expression coming through this individual that's like not that person purely. There's something else expressing through them. And so this guy, he's like, we're bantering, and he's kind of like this real like mocking, impish kind of presence. And these other two people come into the bar, a guy and a girl, and they're these kind of hippie people, and we're there hanging out, and told them I was on mushrooms, and we are having a good time. And they're like, "Oh, you should come back to our house and smoke some weed." I'm like, "Oh, fuck yeah, let's go." So we go back to their place to smoke weed, and my ex was mad that I left. I left a note on the counter that said, "I'm going for a walk," and I just never came back. It was like 2 in the afternoon when I left that note, and it was like 1 a.m. when these people wanted me to go to their house. So, and it was before cell phones, believe it or not. Um, Before I had a cell phone, anyway. And so we go to these people's house, smoke some weed, and I call on their house phone. I call my ex to come get me, and she's like, "No, I'm not coming to get you." And it's like, all right, well, she had kids there and stuff. I was like, all right, whatever. And so I decided I'm going to walk home, and it would have been about a 2 mile walk. And so I take out, and then these people like they're like, whatever, see you, bye. And I didn't know them; they were just hanging out. Leave, and I'm walking across the parking lot, and I'm well drunk, but I'm aware. I mean, I'm staggering, but I wasn't blackout drunk. I remember everything about walking through that parking lot and getting lost in the parking lot and like how the fuck am I going to get out of this big ass complex and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and this is before Ubers. This like probably like in her 70s African American woman pulls up beside me and she's like, "Honey, where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going home." And she's basically like, "Oh, you can't go home like that. You can't go home like that. Get in this car. Let me give you a ride." I was like, "All right, cool." And so I got it. I got in her car, and she gives me a ride. And the I would have had to have walked across the intersection of Hurstbourne Lane and Bardstown Road. I don't know if you know where Roosters is, and that coming out from our place, that great big intersection. I would have had to walk through all that. It would have been all bad, all bad. And then I would have had to walk another couple miles back down to the apartment where I was at. And so we get in the car and she's talking to me about God and she's talking to me about Jesus and she's talking about like all this kind of church religious stuff. And I was like, I was talking with her about it. I wasn't like in opposition to her. I had very recently come out of the Catholic Church. And I'm sure people are going to think this is just bullshit, my drunk ass, but we get to the apartment and like she pulls in like a couple of apartment blocks away from where my house was, and this big long driveway. I mean, it wasn't like she just pulled in, dropped me off, and left. She pulls in this long driveway back towards the back, and she's like, God bless you, you're a sweet soul, blah blah blah. I get out of the car, and like I turn to wave goodbye and there's nobody there. There's no fucking car. There's no little old black lady. There ain't nobody there. And I was just standing there like fucking like, what the fuck? Like, and absolutely stunned, chills, like, what the fuck just happened? And I still don't have a good answer, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
I know you think I was just drunk and high, and I was drunk and high, but I'm a professional at getting fucked up. Like that's actually my job is taking drugs. Sort of.
I mean, it reminds me of the couple of times that I dabbled with the moonshine. Except for there was a longer hiatus in the pause.
Fuck no, this was like immediate, and it was a lot. Like I say, I would have seen her driving off. There's no two ways about it. She was just gone. What do you think, Emily? You believe in angels? You're muted. We can't hear you. You and this audio. What's up? It says you should be good. You have Bluetooth on or something?
I just want to know how hot it is in Florida. If it's like 97 here.
I don't know what's going on there, man. So weird. Keep trying, man. I'd love to hear from you.
All right.
Oh.
Did it work?
There it is.
Or something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. All right, sweet.
All right. Just doing phone then, so I'm going to be yelling loud. It's 88 degrees right now.
Okay.
Where I'm at.
Is it warmer here, Tristan?
It was 97 today. And
Really?
according to the Apple weather, it felt like 110.
Damn.
My apartment was set to 68. We got in here and it was 77. And then before this, it was actually 78. So, don't live on the top floor of an old house.
Wow. Okay. What you want to talk about with us today, Emil?
Oh, nothing. I don't have anything in particular. I just finally remembered to call in and say hello. So I don't know. I
Okay.
just wanted to see you guys. I was listening to the stories. I always enjoy those.
You got any experiences with angels or aliens?
Oh man, not off the top of my head. I mean, I always jump into these calls like in between jobs or driving, and so I'm always like, oh, let me jump in, and I have nothing to say. But let's see, angels or aliens? I can definitely relate when you say that you've been in situations like I probably should have been dead a lot. I've done a lot of crazy things that shouldn't have made it out of, and I don't know if part of that is just being lucky or angels or I mean, all right. So I got an example for you, and it also involves alcohol. We were drinking at my friend's house, like in like Robert, Louisiana, which is on the North Shore, like in the sticks. And it's like 2:00 in the morning. We're like, hey, let's go do something cool. It's like, all right, well, what can we do at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning in Robert, Louisiana? And we're like, let's go jump off a bridge.
Oh,
great idea. So we drive east on I-12, like a good little ways to get to this bridge. It's an interstate bridge. It's I-12 on the Tufunky River in like
the what?
Madisonville or whatever. Tufunky.
They said "fuck you, river." Okay.
It's try to spell it. It's just as difficult. And so we go. Actually, no, we didn't have to drive. This chick's house, she had family that was there. We were in close proximity to this bridge. So we go to this bridge on the interstate, like 3 o'clock in the morning at this point, and we go and jump off the bridge. And we had done this before at this bridge. Like we skipped school one day, and it was like a flooding day, and we went and jumped off this bridge. And we knew, like, if you're ever going to jump off a bridge that is jump offable, like not to jump off and kill yourself, you always want to jump, especially in Louisiana, at the top, like at the highest point, because there had been people that had jumped off this same bridge that died, and they died because they didn't go all the way to the middle of the channel, and they jumped off and just got like stuck in the mud.
Oh.
And then, can you imagine being, drinking and being like, oh, let's jump off a bridge, and then not jumping off the highest point of the bridge, ending up in the shallow water and just getting stuck in the mud, 4 feet below the water.
Oh, goddamn, yeah.
But, we didn't do that. And I don't know if the intuition was like, if you're going to jump off a bridge, obviously you got to jump off the highest part, or if it was, I don't know where that voice was. I was like, go all the way to the middle. But like, here I am today with a fun story about jumping off bridges.
Well,
I don't know. That's just one I got off the top of my head.
Well, what about intuition? I think that's a really interesting topic that is very relatable to the mushroom space. Like, where does intuition come from?
I mean, that's the subtle voices that we pay attention to. Like, I find that all the time lately. Like, we're just doing the bees and just like whatever my frame of mind is when I go work with the bees.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not cool, I get checked real quick. And a lot of that is like, I don't know, like the intuition, it's like a little voice that doesn't speak, but you can feel it, and it's very quiet. I find it with like finding the queen. Like I'll be stressing about finding the queen. I hadn't found her, and voices like, just chill out, relax, go do something else. And, within 3 minutes or something, there she is, she pops out.
So what about that? Yeah, the bees responding to your energy. What have you experienced there?
Oh, I get checked quite regularly. You can see I look a little beat up right now. That was from yesterday's job where I went in and it was a pretty big hive, and I took the sheetrock down. We had a bad introduction, so like I kind of had a shitty attitude going into it, and I cut open like 4 foot of sheetrock as a ceiling. And I went to lower it, and the sheetrock just like crumbled, and the bees were not happy to see me. And I got lit up like probably 50 times. And it was in a closet, so like it didn't really like affect anybody else except for me. So I got out of the closet and like regrouped and like, picked all the bees out of my hair and whatnot. Woo. And went back and was like, all right, I need to change my shit because they're picking up on it. And I went back in, and it was like a 6-8 hour job, and I only got stung like a couple times after that. But that initial opening was rough.
And you don't think that was that not just a response to them being surprised? I mean, how do you relate that to your state of being?
I don't know. Like, yes and no. I mean, part of it's being surprised, but part of it is like being in a shittier attitude. Maybe I was not as careful as I could have been, and I should have known like to cut a piece of the sheetrock instead of trying to pull a whole 4-foot section down by itself. I don't know. I feel like I get cocky once I'm in the groove for a while and like thinking stuff's easy, and then not thankful or grateful for where I'm at and what I'm doing. And as soon as I catch myself slipping, I get checked hard.
I mean,
and then after that, I kind of changed my attitude and was like more grateful and gracious and gratitude, like and went back in, and it was fine. But like, I don't know. I feel like the bees check me when I'm in a poor attitude pretty quickly.
I can see.
Do you notice a difference between like the hive mind like species and the I mean, I don't know what insects you worked with that aren't, such a colony, just in how they sense that maybe?
No, pretty much everything I work with is colony based. I mean, if it's not honeybees, it's yellow jackets or bumblebees, but bumblebees are super rare, and yellow jackets are only late in the year. And they kind of have more of a one-track mind. I mean, when they get riled up, they're just coming at you, and they're not stopping. I feel like the honeybees are definitely much more capable of teaching, if you will, just because they can. I don't know. I mean, I guess I spend more time with them, but their temperament changes, and I feel like it's definitely tempered by the reflection, like your attitude at the time.
Mm-hmm. Makes absolute sense. I mean, you definitely see it in like dogs. It's a pretty common thing people talk about. If you're afraid of a dog, then you're more likely to get bit by it, kind of thing. And I think you've worked a fair amount with reptiles too, right, Emil?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've seen that like in the snakes, like the people who are afraid of the snakes, like the snakes don't want to be held by them, but people who are relaxed and curious, then like it's reflected back to them from the animal very, very often.
Yeah, I feel like they it's almost like animals are tripping all the time. They're like just in their bubble when they're they can feel like, at least with bees, when people like the people that are scared to get stung, they're tense, their breathing is rapid, they're spazzing out usually, like they're swatting at them, like just their whole energy changes.
Right.
And it's not even like being scared to get stung. Like it's even customers that are like when scout bees show up at their house and they're house shopping, they're checking their house out, and they're fearful that something like there's a huge problem, but there isn't a problem. They're just house shopping. So I'll talk to them and be like, look, if you can observe them, like they're not aggressive, they haven't moved in yet. How are they flying? Like look at their behavior, not as like, oh my God, bees. Like look at what they're doing. How are they flying? What are they doing? And when you apply like emotion to their behavior, or look at it as like an entity that has a goal and they're doing something on purpose, or just being able to look at them not from a place of fear, because the fear just blinds people. Whereas when they start to observe instead of just react, they're like, oh wait, yeah, they are just flying around in figure eights, and like they do kind of look like they don't know where they're at, and they're checking it out for the first time. Whereas like an established colony, you'll see very consistent activity, like pulling in your driveway every day. There's no hesitation. Whereas like scout bees, they're shopping. They're like pull up, they hesitate, they fly around, and like, but people looking at them from a place of fear can't observe that nuance. And it's not until they are observing as opposed to reacting through fear that they can see it.
Totally.
And it's as simple as that change in their perspective for it to catalyze and happen like that.
So I do have a question for both of you all. we're talking about like animals and that, you know, snakes can be that way. Dogs can be that way if you're scared of them. I personally have like this little, almost like a motto I'm living by right now, and that is that I won't get a dog that if it got really pissed off could kill me. Like that was that much bigger than me, and I'm not that big of a guy anyways.
Yeah.
So I think about that whenever I'm thinking about like snakes and large reptiles. Like, is there a point though where, regardless of how you look at this python, that this python has just grew and it's 13, 14 years old, big boy, big girl, and just gives zero fuck about your life at this point, because like at this point it knows that one mano a mano, without some type of weaponry, you're not gonna win.
I mean,
Like
there's
nature
definitely
being
people,
nature.
there's definitely people that get killed by their big snakes, and that happens. But there are also people who are like crocodile whisperers. You know, there's some pretty cool stuff out there, and there's been evidence that. So the most recent thing that I read was some research around enriched habitats for reptiles, and
Mm,
they have shown that reptiles who are provided with habitat enrichment, which means like a variety of scents, a variety of places to explore, a variety of temperature gradients, and etc., that they are able to learn their names, to learn to distinct different people from each other, and solve simple problems, and kind of some other pretty interesting learning abilities. But reptiles that do not have that enrichment, they just kind of go brain dead, and they can't. And that's
mm-hmm.
when they're more likely to kind of lash out or attack their owner, because it's just kind of all the same. It's all just
Yeah, they're insane. That
yeah,
Yeah,
makes me
they're in
think of that.
prison.
That
yeah,
makes me think of that mouse study with the the cocaine and the mice.
yeah.
Where it's like, oh well, yeah, they'll just do coke until they can't do anything else. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you just gave them a container that's
How about you
zero
put a wheel in there?
and just coke, and then you give them a fully fulfilled habitat, and
Yeah.
it stimulates and it works that muscle, and they
I
don't
mean,
have that same kind of,
they still do coke, but just not as much.
yeah, just, before fun times and things like
Yeah,
that.
like once a week.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a shame. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say this, even though I will also say that I've only had 2 experiences with cocaine. That was years and years ago. I was like 21 years old. But it's a shame now that I actually would be open to trying it after reading more and getting educated. It's all fucking tainted with fentanyl. You can't even get like actual cocaine anymore, from what I understand.
Well, it's
That's what
just a big risk. You got to know where you're getting it from, I guess.
I would
guess.
really like to go to South America. There's a group of indigenous people who have like started marketing coca leaf products.
Oh, really?
They have it's called Coca-Cola, and Cola in their language means a beer. So it's a
Oh,
coca related beer. And Coca-Cola definitely doesn't like them at all.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing too. Like for me, the actual ceremonies that they had and the teas that they, for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, that they've like used. I mean, that's a lot different than going skiing in Miami at the VIP section of the club. Like,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
Yeah, with
That's a very
with
different thing.
refinement, you've lost the community and you've lost the tradition around it.
yeah,
The chewing a coca leaf is very far removed from the concentrate and the solvents that powdered cocaine is.
What about DMT? How y'all feel about smoking DMT? Because that to me is that's like the crack of psychedelics in my mind. You know?
Yeah, it's I mean, the thing that like the pens gets me on that, like, it's so convenient. There's no pretense of respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like if you can hit a DMT pen as easily as you can just dab a dab.
Which
Oh, and the
even that,
marketing of the
I mean,
packaging
like
is like
even that,
crazy.
dabs are so fucking potent. And we're and people are like, we're just walking around like just sucking on a fucking dab all day long. I mean, I've been there and I've done that, and I'm not necessarily knocking it, but it's so far removed from the original plant and from that connection with the plant that I'm not a purist, but I think there is a lot of value in that purity.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, as long as there's a drug war, all the incentives are towards higher concentration. Because if you're
Well,
getting time for as much, like if you're getting just as much jail time for a plant as you are for a concentrate, then why would you mess around with a plant?
yeah, but I mean, is that really like? Does it really have to do with the drug war, or is it more that people just want to get as fucked up as they humanly can?
I think as long as there's prohibition, then there's an institutionalized incentive for higher and higher purity.
But weed's not.
I agree.
But I mean, I agree that it feeds it, but cannabis is legal in lots of places, and in lots of places where it's legal is where you are getting these highly concentrated oils and whatnot. And I mean, I don't know. I agree that has a role to play, but I also think that it's just like human nature to want to take things to the fucking limit.
Yeah, you got to one up the last guy, right? Like,
And I think that's something
nature
that
competition.
that comes out from almost like for my opinion, like the youthful engagement into that. You hear a lot of people, and I'm a big supporter of this. I still need a T-shirt that says it. Just bring back mids, because like, yeah, there's young people who like whenever they smoke, they want to launch themselves into whatever atmosphere that space is. It's very, weird, like to be super high versus like a classical psychedelic. But there's also like this point where you get 35-year-olds or even just late 20s where people, they no longer want moon rocks, like these like incredible things that we're
Yeah.
getting. It's like
That shit's crazy, dude. You see those?
it's not marketable.
It's crazy. Those fucking moon rocks, fucking rolled in oil and dabbed with keef. It's just like, are you serious? Which, incidentally, I forgot that I ate a gummy and it just started kicking in. So there's that.
That's the best way to do it, right? Is to eat it and then forget it. Same thing with mushrooms. Like,
yeah, I like it. I like doing it. But I think there's, Tristan, I think that there are people that want to get really fucked up even as they're older. It's like, I get what you're saying. It's just that I find myself more and more as I think about the way I think about things that I have this kind of like, well, it's this because of this, but in reality, it's like all of this because of all these factors. There's everything is so deep and rich.
I mean, like if drugs were legal and like the drug war didn't exist, it
Have you ever?
sounds so weird, but like I guarantee you that even in like, look at like opiates, like you would end up with a spectrum of opium poppy derivatives. Like if there was no drug war, like you would have heroin, you would probably just have like extract straight from the plant. And so like I guess that's one of my things is, going back to what Emil said, it's
well, you have that now.
we don't have variety.
What was that, Emil?
You have that now. You just got to get a prescription, and it's a packed and pressed pill, and it's lesser derivatives of the same thing.
Yeah,
but I think there would definitely be more of it, and there'd be more competition. And I like competition. I like choice.
Yeah, that's a good thing, right? That's what we want, is to have more options and more kind of people getting out there and helping to figure things out. Because I mean, that's a beautiful thing that humans do. It's not just that we want to get more fucked up. it's that humans are always trying to improve on everything, which is a beautiful thing about us. You know, like that's awesome. Look at we're here talking. I mean, I love that I can talk with Emil in Florida. I love that.
Yeah.
All the people that we can meet through virtual space and like all the fucking things that we have are because people have continued to try to improve on the things. And like, I mean, it's just natural. Like you take a drug to experience its effect. So if you're going to make it better, then you're going to make it stronger. You know?
Or
It would
stack the
be-
effects with some other drug or whatever. Yeah, whatever
or
the goal
stack
is. I mean,
it.
there's definitely different ways to get to them.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of stacking, who here has ever had a what's it called? Hippie flip, mushrooms, and MDMA? You ever do that, Emil?
Yeah, before, yeah. I mean, I used to go to festivals like when I was younger,
I love that response.
and that's like just a like scheduled window to go on an exploratory roller coaster of whatever the fuck you're looking for. So yeah, I've done that before.
So yeah. What is it when it's LSD and MDMA? It's something different. It's not hippie flipping. It's candy flipping. Is that what it is?
I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's
I
what
don't
I've done. I've taken DMT. I've smoked DMT on the tail end of a mushroom trip. I've mixed mushrooms with alcohol way back in the day, and of course cannabis I've mixed with mushrooms. But I've been pretty committed to mushrooms only.
Yeah, I mean, mushrooms and MDMA is kind of like, I feel like it's different realms. Like MDMA and acid probably go better.
During my like
Just because of
I
the
did this
play, like
webinar,
the more unpredictable nature of mushrooms is. But
Yeah.
I guess
but during this
on
webinar, they
MDMA everything's a little
literally
rosier depending on how.
Well, it's like
Sorry.
which one do you in what order do you do them too? Like what I've done is LSD and then MDMA. I've heard people doing MDMA and then mushrooms is kind of makes for an easier transition. It's makes for a more pleasant trip or a more assuredly quote good trip, which makes sense because if you go into a mushroom trip feeling like your 7-year-old best self, then it's probably gonna
there's some like underground therapists that talk about like
Yeah, the
adding
set and
5-MeO
setting
at the end
comes
of
right
it.
back to it. Like I can tell you an example where I saw like my daughter had to do surgery one time when she was really really little, and we brought her. The surgeon wasn't. It was the guy that was nearby. It wasn't a specialist, and so when they put her under for the anesthesia, she woke up just screaming, like blood curdling pain, just horrible spot. And then we ended up having to go to Stanford to see a specialist down the road a couple years later. And before they put her under, they brought in a projector and like a disco ball, and like they put on like Frozen and like lights, and like the hospital room was transformed from this sterile like fluorescent light scared place to like this magical princess, like just beautiful room of colors and calmness and princesses. And when she woke up from that surgery at Stanford with the pediatric orthopedic specialist, there was none of that fear and anxiety. And what it was is, the way you go under is the way you come out.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a number of things that made Stanford just stick out as such a better place. But, that was one thing that just hit home for me is like, man, that's, we always hear about set and setting as adults and like in recreational settings, if you did your homework like on Arrowwood or whatever, but to see it in my daughter as just a human specimen before adult thought comes into play, and just seeing that as like an actual fact of life was very, very powerful to really, entrench the importance of that prior to going under or going in or going out of the normal consciousness. And it makes tons of sense. Like it makes so much sense.
Absolutely. And what it also speaks to is something that I've been working with in terms of this kind of attempts to improve my consistent state of mood, and that is trying to make sure that I go to bed in a very positive mindset, because if I do, then I'm going to wake up in a positive mindset. So I will spend time often kind of meditating in bed, just reflecting on the good things that have happened or the good people in my life or whatever it is. Yeah, man, it's like our experience is always contextualized. We don't realize that. And I think that's really what the lesson of the psychedelic set and setting shows us is that everything's a fucking variable. Everything in your field is impacting the way that you're experiencing the now.
One thing I want to throw in here,
I
talking
lost
about
the audio. I can't hear you guys anymore.
Oh, we hear you.
Yeah. There were people that were talking about
Son of a bitch. What the fuck?
underground.
I had a call come in and now it's not working.
Can you hear us? No? Go ahead, Tristan.
Just that some people were referring to like adding 5-MeO at the end of like mushroom experiences or even just ayahuasca experiences.
Mhm.
And that was like, whenever I first heard this, I was like, not like kind of blown away, but I kind of was blown away. That it was like they were referring to these things as boosters, and they were like, if you're working with someone, a lot of these people were, underground, and then they were like, I don't know, I was just kind of like perplexed by it. I was like, so you're gonna hit a home run, and then you're gonna take them and hit a grand slam after that? Like, I was just kind of blown away, like coming out of a mushroom experience for some pretty profound for people, and then you're just like nuking them into the bliss of existence or something. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person's level of experience,
yeah.
what they're after. The times when I have done DMT after a mushroom trip, I'm gonna mute you, Emil. There, once you get settled. Um, when I've done DMT after a mushroom trip, it's kind of felt like, I wouldn't say a waste, but it's something that it's so powerful, and as a standalone experience, it carries so much weight. So I don't know. I do think that there's a potential for us to try to go too fast, too far with all the psychedelics. I have absolutely have seen worked with people who have done mushrooms they've never done mushrooms before. They come and do a couple, 2 or 3 trips, and they're not fully stabilized for a couple of weeks, and they need some support. So something like NNDMT or 5-MeO, like right after a psilocybin trip, I think probably should be reserved for those who are significantly experienced and have, a community where they can
Mm-hmm.
kind of work through it. Because I don't know, as much as I love psilocybin, I am concerned to some extent that we'll figure it out as we go. It's all good. But I think we very severely underestimate the potential for it to shake our reality up so much that we have a hard time working back within normal society. I mean, you said it right at the very start of this thing, Tristan, talking about having, an experience where your entire ontological structure is just fucking imploded. And then the next day it's like you go back to working at Costco, like, what about you, Emil? I mean, I think that's one of the things that we talked about on the retreat there. It's just kind of like after having all those big fucking experiences and then just going back into regular life without people to talk about it with, like, it can be challenging. I mean, how have you navigated that?
I just talk to people that don't want to hear it about it.
I love it. I fucking love it.
Yes.
No, I mean, I look forward to the friends that I can have those kind of conversations with, but a lot of that whole, I feel, with just like the community built around the church.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't really talk about it with people that haven't swam in the pool because they don't even know what the water feels like or looks like, or so. And those conversations take time, and like you have to have a place for it. I would say I felt that more just like on the mushroom. Like my first dose in January was like that, like just coming down, just felt like an empty vessel, and like didn't know. Like, I knew I had to do human things, but I forgot what they were, and I had like zero content. I was just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was walking around with my yoga mat halfway rolled up for like 3 hours. That's where I was at that place. But like once I came back and like ate food again and like got back to it, I don't know. It's like New Orleans. It's a fun place to visit, but you don't want to live there. But
Yeah.
It's fun to visit. But when you get, time's up, it's okay to come back. I don't. But I can see like, I mean, I've been messing with these things since I was like 15, so I can remember that the profundity of that at such a young age just humbled the shit out of me. But
Yeah.
I could see being an adult and never having had that experience, and then going back to the grind of where you have found yourself through whatever your life choices got you there.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're already not in a great place and then you have like beautiful, powerful experiences like that, and you got to go back to a life that you built that is different than what your calling is, or, is not congruent with where you thought you would be. I could see how that could be really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think that kind of just goes back to why I really feel like psychedelics as a rite of passage, is where a lot of power is for beneficial use going forward. And that was another one of my reasons for wanting to join up with the church and just kind of see how it's used with that intention, but also building a safe container to have that for my kids in the future and other, just have that rite of passage to like, hey, like you're no longer a kid. Here's how much we don't know about everything, and you can face that for yourself in this safe space and do with it what you may. But like, don't take yourself too seriously. Get out of the media. Like, have fun. Be kind. I don't know. Like, it just feels like a very potent rite of passage, and I still don't know what that is going to look like and what age that will be appropriate. But I know in my own life, my first psychedelic experience was at like 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I had quite a few after that, just kind of following Arrowhead and like learning about different substances and like, oh, I want to try this. I want to see that. I want to feel this. But it was just purely out of like shopping around of possibilities and just being fascinated with the ability to change the channel of your consciousness by just ingesting a substance.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas wrapping that in with the spirituality and the respect and the just everything that comes with it in a healthy use case scenario, where it's not like, oh, I'm sleeping over at my friend's house and we're going out and, sneaking out of their house to go to a party, like just having that safe space and the honesty that comes with it, I think is going to be, I really look forward to that day.
Dude, my 19-year-old is like speaking to me in a way lately that I don't think he would be speaking like this had he not had the psychedelic experiences that he's had. I mean, he was 14. I dosed him in Jamaica. And his level of appreciation for life and for me and for his family is so far beyond what mine ever was at his age, and his ability to kind of discern what he wants rather than what he's being told he wants is, it's a part of his personality, but I'm confident that it's been accentuated by psychedelics. And he's been able to reach out to me even when he was having a tough trip in the middle of the trip and say, hey, I'm fucked up. I need to talk about this. And then to be able to spend that time with him and help him kind of get back in a good space or feeling confident and feeling secure. Like, what kind of amazing bonding that is for families. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I hear about, like Emil saying like 15, or, had some other people talk about, that age range, whenever I first heard and like you learn the indigenous cultures earlier. And you know, I agree with what Emil said, that in a way, like there's parts of that that are good, because like you, if you were going to engage with something like this, I'm not saying that, you know, underage people should, but what I'm saying is that, you know, by the time you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, you've built these constructs, these identity things. But I guess like all that I'm asking is just, you know, how, I know that drug use underage is typically experimental, and you referred to that, like going out, like doing these things, and reading Erwin. But how did you like integrate, you know, that stuff into your life at that young age?
Well, it was just as long as I took care of my shit, I didn't get any shit for it. You know, like as long as I kept my grades up, as long as I went to practice, as long as, you know, I did what I needed to do, as long as I cut the ice and delivered the skull, you know, as long as I could take care of my responsibilities, no one's the wiser. And
So there was no real integration. It was just an experience that you had. You and your friends were like, "What the fuck was that?" And then you go on and make ice sculptures and go to school.
Yeah, it was just fun. It was just what we would do for just like crazy shit would happen, and we'd talk about it, and like the ability to like change reality just by thinking it and talking it, and like being in the woods and like burning shit and like, you know.
Yeah, I've been there.
You know, I mean, just like we just would experiment with shit. I mean, we used to robo trip, like go to school, you know, go to the store and buy the extra strength Robitussin and do the dextromethorphan, DXM, and like got into that for a little while, and like just curiosity of changing the consciousness. Like always was drawn to it. And then living in a port city, you can find whatever you wanted. I mean, I guess it's like that everywhere, but some places it's more like that.
Yeah, I'd say New Orleans is a little more like you can get whatever. Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, you don't want to live there. That's right. He found that out.
I mean, I loved it, but like knowing what I got into as a kid, like that's what, you know, it's a very conflicted place. I mean, I love that city. I love my family. I love the food and the culture, but like, it's such a beautiful place. And yet like industry has just been shitting on it since Huey P. Long, and like 100 years of just destroying it. And like, it's just it's a tough place. Like it's so much beauty and like so much wasted potential and so much just like trash, like literal trash. When I go home now, it's just like, and it's just a reflection of the people's state of mind.
Well, that's how we started this conversation out, talking about how our outside world is a reflection of our inside world, which seems very, very true. I'm gonna be hopping off here soon, but there's a couple of things you brought up that I'd love to really talk about more in depth another time. And that's, you know, you said like taking mushrooms and changing your reality by the way you think, and that's something that there's a lot that we could expand on there and kind of dive into deeper. And it's something that I'm trying to find more effective language to discuss, because it is so real. And the ability to be able to discuss it in the context of psychedelics, but also in a way that is presented kind of in a very down to earth and realistic way, not just like, oh, you think about a new world and you end up with a new world. But there is a fair amount of study that's been done, and it continues to be done in things like the 0 point field and the theory that, you know, all matter comes from non-matter, and where that interface is the mind, which is not necessarily limited to the human. But another thing you brought up, you're saying that the use of psychedelics for an initiation rite and to kind of begin breaking down those rigid structures that have a that create a story around reality, starting at an early age. And Tristan, you mentioned the indigenous, particularly, I think, of course, the Mazatec is who I think about with mushrooms. And, they were dosing kids around 7 or 8. And at age 7 is when it's generally said that if you, what was the Jesuit motto, give me a child until he's the age of 7 and I'll give you the man, right? That first 7 years is the most formative in our subconscious mind. So after, just to think that possibly the indigenous cultures were wise enough to immediately or very soon after we passed through that state of mental flexibility, that they started to introduce psychedelics into those who were able to kind of tolerate it, because obviously they didn't give psychedelics to all the kids. There were those who were kind of selected as the shamanic tendency ones who would be allowed to go there. But it's an interesting kind of view of the timeline within the indigenous cultures, in parallel with the development of children, adolescents. That's an interesting thing to consider. And then the last thing I want to say, Emil, I don't know if you'll make it for this one. I don't know if we're having this retreat in August, in the camping retreat, and it's got some caves and stuff. Like this is just kind of our first go at this place to check it out, see what the lay of the land is. Shane, who I hope he's listening at some point. Love you, Shane, man. This guy's fucking cool as beans, man. Who's going to be going to help. He's helped us get this spot. He does the cave tours, but one of the caves is a big commercial cave. I think like limestone they dug out. And so it's like, he said they do like lights in there and have parties and stuff in there. And you were talking about your daughter being in the hospital. I want to get one of those. What kind of projector? It's like a 360 projector, like a big music spinning,
like a planetarium projector.
Yeah, like a planetarium projector, and go in there and do like a low, moderate dose with a group of people in the cave. How cool would that be?
That'd be pretty dope.
Cool. So if you don't make it to this one, I'll be sure we get some pictures and let you see what this is like, because this could be a spot where we could, over some long time, do some really cool stuff. The board of the property is all about the church and full support of our mission. So it's all transparent and could be a very cool thing that I would suspect you'd get digging on.
Sounds pretty cool. I'm already, yeah. You had me at camping.
Yeah, man. Glad to see you got to go on that trip. Did the last thing I'd like to kind of get back into, just out of your experience, when that river trip was such a part of your mushroom trip, did any of that come up on the river trip? Was there any kind
of no, it was a much smaller, like it was smaller as far as like participants, and we didn't need any mushrooms on the river this year. But I mean, I definitely thought about it, but it's like we go every year, and it's like it's my daughter and my son's like favorite vacation thing that we do. So I mean, we had a blast, but it wasn't nothing really came out of it in that regard.
Okay.
Besides the iron, like how crazy it was that I was on the river and I made it for like the majority of the call, which like the way that worked out, because it just worked out. Like it worked out. We actually paddled 22 miles the day before.
Wow.
Picked that spot, and it happened to have reception, and then we stayed there for the whole day. And so like there was just a lot of things that, like, the fact that I was even on the call was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, not much came through in that other regard. But also I was just, I weren't dappling.
Yeah. But I mean, it's pretty cool that we were there, for your trip, when that was such a big part of your mushroom trip. And then when you were on the Buffalo, we were there for that.
Yeah,
Pretty
exactly.
cool.
That was cool. Definitely.
Awesome.
And so maybe in hindsight that was part of it. Like,
well, it's fucked up because you were asking Tristan and me if we were going to come, weren't you?
Yeah, and I didn't know that I was going to sign up for the cleric thing. Like, I didn't like in January that wasn't on the radar at all.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even a thing. And so, well, shit. Now that you say it,
see, integration.
yeah.
Oh man, that's classic. Wow. Yeah, you were like, "Are you gonna go? Are you gonna be there?" That's awesome. All right, guys, I'm gonna go get these kids in bed. Help Courtney with that. Thanks for hopping on, and we're making it a great call, brother.
Yes, man. A pleasure. Love you guys. Take care.
Love you back. All right, Tristan. Thank you, sir.